Hi there, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Mr. Ed Draws. So in a previous episode, I created this here, and in that episode, I talked about how I was starting small with something like this, and then hopefully in the future I would go a little bit larger. And one of the larger projects that's like this was a Star Trek The Next Generation control panel. So I had two of those. I had one that was kind of medium busyness right here, and then I had another one that was a lot of busyness. So I decided I would start with the lesser of those two and use this one here and animate it like I did in the last video. So I stripped everything off, got rid of as much as I could, and still retained a lot of the stuff that I would need to show all the time. And then I sat down at my computer, and in P5js I did a lot of programming. I did section by section, so I think it was like 6 different sections, and there's code for each one of those sections. And then there's some algorithms that I borrowed from other programmers and plugged them in. So I learned a lot making this project. But what do you think? Isn't that just incredible? I love this. It is what I dreamed of whenever I was designing this to begin with. I was like, oh, that'd be great if this actually moved. And I knew some programming, but not in P5js. It was in like AppleSoft, so it would have been really chintzy looking graphics. So I didn't invest a lot of time into it. But as soon as I learned P5js, I was like, oh yeah, that's the first thing I want to learn how to do. And in order to do all the stuff that you see on the screen, it's like 10 weeks worth of study to learn how to do all of the things. And then there's a couple things that I use that I didn't do, and I don't completely understand them. And I'll explain those here in just a minute. But before I do, if you're not subscribed and you like what you see here, hit subscribe, hit the bell to be notified, hit the thumbs up if you like what you see, and be sure to give me a comment if you have any questions or just to say hi. So the lower part is where I use the other person's algorithms. This is called flocking algorithms, those little spaceships, I guess, I imagine. In the fiction of this project, those are spaceships, and the thing moving over is my ship's targeting sensor, and it's looking for them, and when it sees one, it shoots at it. And those ships fly around based on an algorithm that somebody else made. And I don't know if you follow Smarter Every Day on YouTube, but he just recently posted a video about this, so I'd encourage you to look at that if you want to find out more about that. After filming the video for this, I went back and tweaked a few things. So you might notice that in some shots the ships are blue, and in other shots they're white. That might stand out. That's one of the differences. And this project's one of those things where I can just tweak and tweak and tweak and just continue to refine and tweak and add. And so I'm going to do that. This is probably going to change over time. But I had to imagine a scenario, something that was going on that would tell the fiction of this artwork. That it's a control panel, you got tactical red alert there, you've got some things moving around, looks like they're shooting at me, I'm shooting at them. So I'm having this story going as I'm creating the graphics, and I'm trying to imagine what's happening. So as you're shooting, it takes power to shoot, so the batteries or whatever of that's going to go down. So that's what this phaser bank 3 is. There's 4 phasers on each side of that rectangle, and they fire at the ships. And when they do, they go down, and then they regenerate over time. And there's a power level that kind of shows this action as it happens. And those kind of details that took a lot to do. And they're small, and they add a lot to the fiction. And you don't really pick up on it so much if you're looking at the artwork, but it really does sell a lot. So it's worth investing the time in something that people may or may not notice. So up in this part here, didn't invest a lot of time in here, just a little bit of techno babble to make it seem realistic. Have some crosshairs, there's always crosshairs on a panel moving around, and some kind of thing blipping. And I coordinated the phaser fire to different parts on the ship there, so it kind of looks like that's where the ship is firing those phaser beams. I'm not altogether happy with how this section turned out, because the ship itself is printed on the background. So I really don't have any reference to where the ship is. So if I generate crosshairs randomly, they could be off of the ship. And in order to keep everything inside the ship, I had to basically isolate an area within the ship itself, like a rectangle, and the crosshairs stay within that section. I would have liked it to go throughout the ship, everywhere on the ship. Maybe in the future I might do that. So let's step back here and take a look at the overall action going on here. In the bottom, or no, I think the next one is the top right hand part, the shield frequency. This uses basically just a sine wave, simple. It oscillates in its frequency and in its size across the screen, and I use that data to inform the readout there. So it's not real data. I mean, it's not moving at whatever terahertz or whatever. It's not even close. The wave doesn't represent any of the data there in reality. It's just technobabble. And I tried to keep all the words together so they're all related to waveforms like Fourier and modulation and compression, frequency, amplitude. Those are all words that kind of go with waves. So it sells that section. I'm not real happy with it altogether because I think it looks like a website banner. But that aside, it filled in the space. What's next here? I think the starboard targeting array is the next thing. This is pretty much a standard geometry on most Star Trek The Next Generation control panels. You'll see this show up a lot in the series and in the movies, and it can relate to anything. It's just your standard like reset and plus or minus select, that you could find on most electronics, but just a little bit more complicated. And I can populate those geometries with data, but I haven't done that because my program at this point is getting so slow. It's just clicking along. So maybe if I figure out how to make it work faster, I can add more and more stuff and have some more activity. But right now it's pretty busy. But I feel like this section here is a little lacking in some of the data detail. So there's the ship unpopulated, and there it is populated with all the motion graphics there. The readouts on the sides of the sections in the little sidebars there, that data is changing, and some of it's randomly generated. Some of it is just pulled from data in the program, so I don't have to generate it artificially. I can just pick a variable that changes and plop it in there, and it looks like something's happening. About half the time I corresponded the changing data with something real, but the other times it's coordinated to one of the animation's XY coordinates, or it's coordinated to the time. And you may notice that the time is running there above in the starboard targeting array. You can see that's actually the time that I pulled off of my computer and put in the program. So if anything, if this was a screensaver, you could use it as a clock. So there's that, and it's kind of fun to watch because you can see the crosshairs. It's moving with linear interpolation, so it's not really targeting them. It's just kind of randomly moving around the screen. I imagine the ship is moving through space and is trying to follow those ships through space, and this relative movement creates this kind of strange effect to where things aren't moving relative to one another, but they are relative to space. So when you put those things together, the randomness can be accounted for the shift in relative angles. If you enjoyed this, thank you so much. I appreciate you sticking around to watch the end of it. Appreciate you watching, and as always, until next time, you guys, take care.